This is Nina Lockwood. Welcome to Get Your Happy Back. Stories and insights that will inspire you to find new sources of happiness in your own life. Hi there. Welcome to Get Your Happy Back. And today I am so delighted to speak with my guest, Lauren Tatro. Lauren.
Hi.
Hi. Lauren and I immediately recognized soul sisters when we met. And because she's got such an interesting background and she's such a bright and shining spirit, I wanted to bring her on and talk about all things happy. So in light of that, I just read a quote this morning from Joseph Campbell, who said he thought what people were really looking for is the experience of being alive. So let's hold that thought because we're going to explore that one. But before we do that, I wanted to read a little bit about Lauren's background for you. After 15 years in a corporate marketing career, Lauren left the industry at the end of 2023 to go full-time into her own coaching business, which is called Discover Essenza Coaching. Regarded as a soul-stirring voice for empowerment, Lauren is also an intuitive life coach who guides her clients to discover their own essence and live their own truth. And she also takes her expertise in marketing and branding as a brand strategist, and she supports women on their own entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
So
Hi,
thrilled
everybody.
to have
Hi,
you
Nina.
here.
Thank you for having me on the show. You're right. We clicked immediately, and I'm so excited just to continue chatting with you because it's always a blast.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So what do you think of that quote by Joseph Campbell?
Well, I think we're all trying to figure out what this whole human experience thing means. And I'm reminded that living and the act of living is really a very sensory experience. I remember when I went on a retreat to Costa Rica, I had this profound feeling like I hadn't really experienced my senses before. Like the earth was just alive in that region. And I brought a little bit of that back with me in terms of understanding that these big feelings and these sensory experiences are part of our birthright, but it really can get dulled out over time. So reconnecting with that is what that quote brings up for me, hearing you say it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with this, but because you were in the corporate world for so long, and there's nothing wrong with the corporate world in and of itself, you can actually make some wonderful contributions. But what was missing for you that you decided it was time to go off on your own?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel at a young age, I just kind of put myself on this fast track and didn't really think twice about it. I really tried to kind of listen to that inner voice. But, when you're younger and trying to figure it all out, there's some survival stuff going on there. And that's how it was for me. So I really wanted to get into marketing because I was an artist. I love connecting people with whether it's communication or artistic rendering or visualizations and stories. That was something I was really passionate about. So when I got into my career, it was really all about, for me, achieving the next thing. And I didn't really stop to think about my bigger why and what I was really doing it for. Certainly the paycheck is great. I fell in love with the people. I worked with phenomenal people, and that really kept me going. I learned more about myself in that environment than probably in any other area of my life, because it was the place where I could practice communicating, regulating my emotion, really understanding how to tune into what a team needs and what people need. And so over time, it just started to feel like I was overflowing from that container, that what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and what I saw myself doing started really changing. And it kind of came in as that hint at first, like, oh, what about this? What if this? What if this? And I remember feeling, yeah, but I can't do both of these things. So it became really a quest for understanding how to pull some of my creative energy into this parallel path and start to nurture and give some oxygen to that little spark that was starting to come alive in me.
And so you took the leap.
I did. And, I would say on paper, it kind of looked like one big one, but it really was a series of little ones along the way. I remember about 3 years prior, that voice started to get louder in terms of, okay, this is really what it's going to be. And I feel this coming. So let me start to think about what do I need to do to feel prepared for that? And even I remember at the time when I formed my LLC and I started doing some things on the side, even the leap of letting my employer know and saying, here's what I'm going to be doing. You might start seeing this out in the airwaves, making sure there's no conflict of interest. So I really wanted to keep things in a mutual respect for that environment while still giving me a chance to take some of those mini leaps, because it's in that doing that I feel it really builds that momentum of, wow, you know what, this might look like a really big leap at that point in December 2023, but for me it had been a series of leaps that brought me to that moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's very rare that we take a leap without some preliminary cooking going on the back burner of what's next, what is more, what is me, how can I bring everything that I love into the space that I have a hand in creating. And one of the things that I see a lot with women that I'm working with who are all involved in that next step, what am I going to do now? Is this all there is? What else is possible? One of my favorite questions is that we kind of forget after a while what it is that is driving us, and that over time it changes. So what we thought was very cool when we were 23, at 43 we're still operating from it, but it doesn't fit anymore.
Yep, absolutely. And I sit with the word freedom a lot, and that my definition of freedom has changed a lot over time. And I think at first it was almost like, okay, I need freedom from something, whatever that is, right? And then it became almost freedom to do something else. And now in this chapter, it's really about settling into that feeling of freedom within myself, regardless of what I'm doing. So even my relationship with what the word security means, or my needs related to productivity, and how much I was really attributing all of that doing to some type of sense of self-worth. I had to sit with that truth. I really, really did, because it kind of came hitting hard after I settled into after that leap. It was big for me.
It's so funny because I was going to ask you that question about freedom. So here we go again. I think that question of self-worth is really interesting because it can get in our way of feeling alive. Am I supposed to do this? Is it going to do something for me in a way that I want to have happen? And I think over time we just lose track, and we're not, I think, until we get to a moment where we realize, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Whatever's been cooking in the background is ready to come out of the oven,
Yes.
or off the stove. Yes. So I'm wondering, with your experience in so many areas, and both of us have a background in the healing arts, what do you think, in light of this question about aliveness and freedom and self-worth and happiness, what do you think we need to be healed from in order to have those things?
That's a juicy question. I love that. I think for me, the themes that started to show up was that I was postponing my happiness, that I was convincing myself that if I just kept going for another couple of years, that I would somehow just arrive to this place of happiness. And so postponing happiness became kind of my aha moment of asking those bigger questions and that why. And so the healing component to all of this, and this is really what drew me to the healing arts, is I think there's this shift from putting a lot of emphasis on everything that's happening external externally, whether it's accumulation of wealth or goods or power or titles, right? Everything kind of out here. And again, it served its purpose. I think that can give people something to work towards. But at a certain point, I think it's starting to feel like not enough. And so that translation of that feeling of this isn't enough can easily become one that goes inward and says, well, am I enough? Is this enough? And so the healing in that is really that art of self-discovery and understanding how what got you to that point in your life of where everything at that time was exactly what you had dreamed of, and understanding that that changes, is that whatever gets you to the next thing and the next point usually requires new depths of understanding of your being. And so it's really, to me, more about that deeper connection and slowing down enough to notice the signals and the cues that are coming from our body, and not all distracted up here and looking at all the flashy things all the time, because I think people are running away from feeling bored, but really it's being. And when we settle into that, it can feel very different if we were in environments that were really externally focused for long periods of time.
Great answer.
Yeah. I know I went through it.
Yeah. You know, I was just talking with a client yesterday, and she was really able to express to me the difference between traditional therapy and working with a more holistic process, which is what we were doing. And in the course of our time together, we talked about all sorts of things, you know, besides we did some art related exercises, and we did some explorations into synchronicities and coincidences and intuition. And what she was saying, which I thought was very profound, was that the difference with traditional psychotherapy was it was mostly outside in perspective, you know, plan of action. This is what you can do. Some delving into the whys of the behaviors that we have. But she said working with a more holistic process was much more from the inside out. Mm-hmm. So her experience of freedom and happiness became more and more something that she realized was already inside her, rather than something she had to get, you know. And it was so profound, because now she said she's living in a space of possibilities where prior to that it was just it was one limitation after another. And it took her a little while, but not that long, to realize so much of that was coming from her own self-talk. You know, I should be doing this. This is important. This is true. And then she started realizing it's all made up. Mm-hmm. We just collectively decide this is true or that's true. And to be able to find your own compass is like the best gift you could possibly give yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what drew me to the field of coaching, because a coach's job is to help people remember who they are by asking those questions that get them to extract their own gold. And in that, they need the like, wow, that came from me. I have those moments all the time with my clients where they're like, they get there instead of, you know, what can happen. And this, particularly this conditioning I was faced with over years of, if you're transitioning from one world where you're getting paid a lot of good money to always be 20 steps ahead and telling people what the next best thing is, and you're transitioning into a place of settling into true active listening and observing what's going on and asking just the right question at the right time, it's like two totally different worlds. And so in that external one where everyone's looking for the next answer, settling into our own innate wisdom. And what I love about coaching and holistic industry at large is it starts from the premise of you are whole and you are complete just as you are. And sometimes we just got to kind of dig in and dig out a little bit. And it's not always possible for somebody to be able to do that without a little bit of guidance or somebody to hold space for them to unpack that stuff in a way that moves them into learning more about themselves.
Oh, gosh. It's just reminding me that when I was initially trained as a psychotherapist, and one of the things that I got very disillusioned about was the fact that people became their stories. The more they told them, they became those stories rather than freeing themselves from those stories and writing a new one for themselves. They became more and more, this is who I am. These were the key players. This is how I was traumatized. And yet all of these, as important as they are to acknowledge those points in our lives, we don't have to continue to keep that identity. And then I found this was also true in much of the healing arts, is that people would get stuck on a symptom and chase the symptom rather than going back to the conversation about where is this coming from?
Absolutely.
It's not, the body just doesn't decide one day, okay, I'm going to get diabetes or I'm going to have a breakdown. It's all cumulative. And I just thought we really need to have more conversations about not being broken.
Yes.
We're not broken, but many of these modalities, whether they're in the psychotherapeutic mode or the energetic mode, are focused too much on the symptoms rather than the cause. And I love what you're saying, that we're all whole, we're all complete, because that's what I thought. I thought, wait a minute, we're starting from the wrong place. This is like, are we still in the Garden of Eden and we're punished for wanting to grow and expand, but we have to blame ourselves for, oh, I'm never this or I'm never that. Share some thoughts with me about that.
Absolutely. A few years back, I was listening to Carolyn Mays, and she had talked about woundology and how we, as humans, there's this woundologist in us. And the whole premise there was through that connection of wounding pattern, but more so from the perspective of feeling that connection with somebody else in the story. This is what I know most about me, because there's this energetic imprint on that story that I remember like it was yesterday. So going back to when we first started talking about what it means to feel alive and to feel something in a world where there's a lot of numbing, I remember feeling that living from my story made me feel like I was alive, but I was actually living from a past place.
All of that drama,
and drama sells. I mean, how many times, if somebody's had a really hard day and they're plopping down and they're watching somebody else's drama on the TV, we love the story. And so when there is that point of, wow, what would I do with a blank slate? What would I do with that big open canvas in front of me? The next whisper is one of familiarity. It's one of, let me go back to what I know through that wounding, through that story, because I feel like that's who I am. And so I was reflecting on this actually yesterday at the bus stop. My son got on the bus, and I was thinking about, when kids are young and an adult asks them the question, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I really sat with that. And I'm like, no, it's not about being something. That's doing, right? What you do every day and how you interact with the world is the doingness of it. So that being takes practice. And there is that fine line between feelings of loneliness and peace. And it's different for everybody depending on that story. So I'm reminded of all those pieces and kind of rewiring who we're programmed to be in pursuit of where we really see ourselves going next.
Yeah. So interesting, all of the archetype stories about coming home to ourselves and that outward journey and getting to a place where we're realizing there's more than this. There's more than everything that they've told us is out here. The success, the stuff, the recognition, the fame, whatever it is, and as much as we can do good things in the world, in that process, what are we really after?
Yeah.
Right. And I think because of the drama, which is so enticing, and the fact that we are in such a busy world and there's so much coming at us, if you just think about how many different kinds of beeps and noises that we hear every day, constantly bombarded with notifications and
Oh, yeah.
all microwave noises, everything you can imagine. And then we have all the conversations with people and their energy. And then there's all the demands of work. It's like, where is our sacred space within ourselves? And can we connect with that? Because otherwise we get caught, as you know, in this endless being pushed somewhere rather than choosing the direction we're going to go in.
Yeah, very much so. And it can quickly feel like, oh, this is just what I have to do.
Right.
Well, and so when you get to that point of feeling like it's not a choice, that's always kind of like my first flag internally. And creating that space internally for me was all through meditation and mindfulness of just observing what was going on upstairs, right? And when you are in a career, which again, for me, was still very fulfilling. I could express myself creatively, but I found that like the majority of my day, I was up here in my mind. And so if I was in a creative session or a coaching session with my staff, that's when I could really tap into this other place. So it became critically important for me to ensure I was prioritizing that definition of balance for me. And that definition of balance is different for everybody. So it's kind of just paying attention to where it might start to be getting kind of too heavy on one side and that outward expression of it, and figuring out what you need to do to come back in is critically important for that listening, for that sacred listening.
Were you always happy? Were you born happy?
No,
okay.
No.
So did you have a pit moment in your life where you said,
oh, yeah.
I got to change?
Oh, yeah.
Something's got to give.
I had, I was a very angry child, and I was fiery. I still am fiery. I kept that fire with me, but I learned, it's
red
literally
hair
coming out of my pores. But I had to, over time, I remember feeling probably my mid-20s. I just remember having this moment of realization that I was the common denominator in all the drama. And when I had that hit me like a ton of bricks, I had to surrender to something bigger than myself and realize that even though if you would have asked me years prior to that moment that did I know it all, boy, did I, because I was still trying to figure out how to channel this power, this energy that I felt within me in a way that could cut through the noise that felt like such nonsense to me at the time, just mundane. I remember feeling all the time as a kid, like, what is this? What are we doing here? And I was angry about that. So those patterns, as I had these moments of awareness where I'm like, wow, I spent a lot of time out here in blame. And after that realization that I was the common denominator is where I was like, I think I need some help here. And I did start out in cognitive behavioral therapy just to understand what's going on. Like, I didn't even know where to start. And it really helped me create a framework of just general awareness of my patterns and what might be at play. And then for me, it became, okay, when I feel like I've outgrown something, and this is the tricky part, right? If we have mentors or teachers or therapists or coaches in our life and we're working with them for a while, there's always a certain point in time where I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready for this next thing, but also not wanting to rush in with impulsivity of like that starter energy, which is that fiery area. I like that energy. So the happiness thing, I actually only really recently, after I left my corporate career, I had to reevaluate what happiness even meant to me. And so I realized some of my patterning around that was my happiness almost needed to feel like an extreme something that I earned in correlation to my unhappiness. And that if I didn't feel this unhappiness, it was if I couldn't have really earned this moment of reprieve and that vacation or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so after I left, things started kind of leveling back out. And I asked myself that question, like, what does happiness feel like for you now? And I really started to reconnect back in with the little joys, the little nuanced things that I just didn't slow down enough to notice, and sink deeper into a profound level of appreciation and gratitude for the magic and the beauty that is outside of us, that is also inside of us.
Love that answer.
Yeah.
I would have given the same one.
Yeah.
But here's a question. Gosh, we're going to have to do this again. But
yeah, I'm in.
what do you think the relationship is between happiness, feeling fully alive, and being a channel?
That's a good question. I think happiness for me is a general state of gratitude and appreciation and noticing. And when I think about being a channel, which I think of this often kind of being a vessel for this work, I'm reminded of, especially in coaching, non-judgmental awareness. What does non-judgmental awareness mean? And even saying something is beautiful is a judgment in some way, because that same thing might not look beautiful to somebody else. So I had to really check myself on what is my general state of being. Like, I consider myself to be a happy person. I'm walking down the street, I'm going to say hi to people. People are probably like, what is going on with this ray of sunshine? Well, you know what? The sun is shining and today's a good day. But I also believe in being honest with myself about where I'm at on the planet on that day, and that it's okay to let yourself be in a state that doesn't feel happy in that moment, because these are like tidal waves that sometimes come to shore, and we need to settle into being to really be able to become a channel and a vessel. But also remember, I mean, when I work with my clients, I center myself to go to that place of non-judgmental awareness, and mindfulness training and the neuroscience of it. It was more so learning what was going on in my mind, what discernments were happening, where was I imprinting a feeling on something that somebody was going through. And for many years, that the flip side of that was actually toxic empathy and codependency.
Yeah.
And so those patterns that showed up, I had to sit with and be aware of, where am I trying to fix this for somebody else? Where am I trying to solve the problem? Versus holding space for somebody to uncover parts of themselves. So that's kind of where the difference comes into play for me.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've found anything to disagree with that you've been sharing this morning. But what this makes me think of is how everybody has wisdom, innate wisdom. Everybody has innate resilience. Everybody is hardwired to experience everything from total joy to total grief and despair or furious anger. Yep. And it's okay to have those feelings. And so many people are afraid of their feelings. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go there, particularly if they're very left-brained. Mm-hmm. So going into this realm of feelings, maybe not today. But to be able to realize that we all have this resilience, and whatever we've had for experiences in the past, they don't define us, and they don't diminish that innate capacity that we have.
Absolutely.
And so many people think that that's, they're broken. They're not broken. They're just confused.
Yeah, I agree. And even if you are somebody listening that might find yourself stuck in some of those past stories, a helpful tool that, really helped me process maybe what happened in the past, but kind of uncouple the story, letting yourself breathe, letting yourself have those feelings. And for me, I would sit with it and think, okay, is there something about this situation that is trying to show me something about myself that I can integrate and transmute and alchemize into wisdom? That is where I was able to extract what I really wanted or needed out of my story and my experience to bring with me into the next round. And when you let yourself breathe it and process it, your body, every time you relive the story in your mind, your body doesn't even know that it's a thing of the past. It's like, oh, here we are again. We're in it again. And it can be hard to, when you have to almost separate out and look at it from an objective lens. And that can be challenging if you haven't properly processed and grieved some of the emotional response to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm. And yet, what other game is there in town?
Right? The mysteries live in there.
I think once we start, well, this is a little bit of a diversion, but not quite. That one of the things that I think that also gets in the way of people just realizing happiness isn't this extreme, bubbly, life is all roses and hearts and flowers, is that we have this dogma of how we should behave, how we should think. We can't have negative thoughts. We have to be on our best behavior. We always have to put a good front and have it available so that nobody sees who we really are on the inside. So there's so many techniques and so many strategies that people are told this is the way to get freedom. But I wonder, what if it's a lot simpler than that? What if we could just put the backpack down that's filled with rocks and just feel into who we really are, because everything is there.
Yeah. Yep. And a lot of conversations that I have, that comes up in conversation related to, I feel like I'm showing up this way in the world, but this is how I really feel on the inside. And so that can build resentment sometimes, in like internal pressure starts to build. And so noticing the gap and the difference doesn't mean you have to swim in it and live in it. It just is a moment of awareness that says, okay, maybe this next time this thing comes up, I'm going to listen to this deeper knowing instead of this conditioned mind or some type of expectation on me. And for me, that connection to happiness is that deeper knowing that I'm okay and that there is divinity involved in each and every one of us. Yeah. And even if the world isn't reminding us of that divinity with what's going on, it doesn't mean that that isn't fully expressed in your being. And yeah, I agree. I think it can be a lot simpler. And sometimes you stumble into that simplicity, like, oh, I can't unsee that now. I spent a lot of years and a lot of lost energy on that. But hey, that allows me to settle in now into a newer definition of freedom, of understanding that exactly more expanded definition of freedom.
I heard a spiritual teacher recently talk about how he had disconnected from his tradition because he saw so many people turning ideas that were potentially so expansive into dogma, into I'm right and you're wrong. This is the right way. That's not the right way. And how much of a weight that is on us all, whether we're coaches or whether we're the one being coached, is that we have so many ideas of what happiness is. And yet, as you say, dropping down from our heads into this deeper space, our heart space, whatever we want to call it. We got all the answers right there, and it is simple. The simple pleasures in life, watching the bees go to the wisteria, or watching a sunrise, or hearing the sound of the ocean, or whatever it is for you, but we don't have to, we can have it all, really, if we're paying a little attention.
Yep, I agree. And I'm reminded in that even, when we talked earlier about feeling like that sense of identity and belonging and connection, And you might move from one area of belief or identity or group and swing really hard into this other way, even though this might feel more aligned for you. I'm reminded again that how quickly we can put ourselves in a box that, like, I need to, if I'm a part of this group, this is what I believe, and I need to go teach that to the rest of the world. When in reality, there's, for me, every time I get too comfortable with a set of ideals, my inner rebel starts to go, yeah, but like, what if there's more? Like, where's your curiosity? That it sounds like that was a statement, Lauren. And so I'm like constantly checking myself, in where am I creating another box? And so I think in settling into that observing life and just being in that space and noticing, it can create more space within ourselves to have patience and compassion and all the other attributes that allow us to not feel like we have to go fight all the battles and prove somebody wrong and teach somebody that this way of doing it is right and their way is wrong, because that same divisiveness and division that we're potentially feeling inside is just spewing out onto the main stage at times. So no matter how justified you feel in it or how strongly or passionate your beliefs and ideals are, making sure that there's a gut check back to, am I actually practicing and embodying these ideals? Is this something that, like, when push came to shove, would I be there for my neighbor in that way that I say is the right way? That is really important in terms of really the embodiment of belief and values.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was so beautifully said. Thank you so much. And we are about at the end of at least this conversation.
That went so fast.
I know.
We went down the portal, Nina.
And we came out again. And who knows where we are?
Who knows?
But it's good.
Yes.
So tell us where you can be found. I know you're on social media, and tell us about where and your podcast and your website.
Absolutely. So I am at laurentatro.com. That's TATRO.com. And on there, you'll find information about my coaching packages. I do masterclass events, keynote speaking, things like that. And then on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, if you're interested in listening to my Messy Leaps podcast. I have a lot of conversations around big leaps, big change, my leap story, which we unpacked a little bit here today.
Yeah.
And connect with me on social. I love hearing from people, hearing what's going on, seeing how people are out there and how we can continue to create and cultivate community within these conversations.
So good.
Yes. Thank you. This has been such a joy, always a joy connecting with you, Nina, but thank you. And congratulations on your relaunch of your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
And thank you everyone who is listening or watching. It's always a pleasure to have you join into this conversation with us, even if you're fly on the wall, so to speak. And we will see you in the next episode. So bye for now.